1. It's always been Creepshow 2.
The one that we have is great value, so it's a Walmart.
Creepshow 2 also, to me, just feels like that perfect 80s time capsule. You know what I mean? Like with the Firebird and the second sequence and all that stuff.
The one that we have is great value, so it's a Walmart brand.
It'll flip your lunch tray.
Hey now. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Planet CHH Live. Real quick, I want to give a shout out to Saturn Video with this $5 super chat. The crossover event of this generation. Planet CHH meets Uncle Bill. This will be an all-timer. I can guarantee you one thing. There are no guarantees. That's what I'll say. Before I bring Uncle Bill in, thank you very much for Saturn Video for the $5 super chat. I've been wanting to do this show for a while. The stars just needed to align, and quite frankly, they have. So I'm not even going to bullshit around. Let's bring him in, the man of the hour, the man with the power, Uncle Red himself, Uncle Bill, in the house. There he is.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here, man.
Dude, it's good to have you.
You know what they say, the only thing that's for sure is that nothing's for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
So we don't know what's going to happen. You know what's going to be said. I guarantee you that whatever's going to be said is going to be pretty fucking honest. So,
And it's going to be the truth. That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
So, Uncle Bill, let me set this up for you, and let me set this up for the audience. Long story short, you guys arrived on the scene a number of years ago. I had heard about the legend of Deadpit. I'd heard about it through different
The
people.
Legend of Deadpit sounds like an awesome film.
The Legend of Deadpit. That's what you guys were, because you were this thing that, in the Deadpit days, I wanted to bring you both on. You were busy. And so I had, I call him Big Creep, but it's Creepy Kentucky and Wes. I had Big Creep on, and it actually worked out great because I said, you know what? I got his side of the story, but I feel that there's more there. I feel like we didn't get the entire picture. So now you're here to set a little score, I guess. We're gonna go over the story of Deadpit from your eyes, from your perspective.
I'm sure it's going to be quite a bit different than from, well, I don't know. I don't know how much different it'll be from CK's, but we'll see. But there's a lot of stuff that happened in the beginning too. A lot of just animosity and vitriol and fights, backstage happenings. We lost a lot of money to managers. No, I'm just kidding. That shit actually happened at all. But we did get sued twice, so that was fun.
So, and this is great. I'm glad you're bringing this up because, I think this is going to be one for the books. And I want to get this started, Uncle Bill, and we don't have to start necessarily from the very, very beginning. Let me set this up and you fill in the pieces and tell me you're obviously been a lifelong horror fan. You grew up watching horror movies. Did the family get you introduced to it? Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, my dad was like a huge horror fan. And by the time I was like 7 or 8 years old, and this is not an exaggeration, he had me watching shit like Dead Alive, Basket Case, Dawn of the Dead, Frankenhooker, just the weirdest, most obscure exploitation splatter films that you can imagine. Like I was seeing at a really, really young age. So yeah, I grew up with it. And then, a little bit later on, probably when I was like an early teen, had a couple of friends, and one of them, I don't know if anybody knows about this guy, but one of them was a guy that they called Boogie, who was a horror host out of Lexington. And he would go around with like old VHS tapes and shit, almost like the Pied Piper of like horror films. Like in our area, you couldn't find anything like halfway decent, but this guy would come in from like Lexington, which is like a bigger city in Kentucky, and he would bring like horror VHS and stuff like that. So really, really early on, like I was seeing stuff like Zombie and a lot of Fulci films, a lot of splatter films, a lot of exploitation from America and stuff too.
So when does Wes come into your life? Is he a childhood friend? Went to school together?
This is a funny story about that. I don't know if he told this story or not. He may have, but like the first time we ever met, we were probably, I would say 3 or 4, and somebody told me this story. I can't remember if it was his dad or my mom or something, but like they put us in a room together, and we were like 3 or 4 years old or something like that, and because our parents knew each other, and we fought. Like we just couldn't get along and shit. We fought with each other. That's like the first kind of happenings that we had with one another. And then we knew each other all the way through elementary school, but we weren't really like friends, like friends until high school. So like freshman, sophomore year of high school. And that's when we started like hanging out and talking about like wrestling and shit like that.
So did you kind of know that each other were into the same things beforehand, but you just weren't in the same group, so to speak? Or
Yeah. I mean, mostly that. Like, I mean, like I said, we knew each other, but we never hung out or anything like that. And like, there was a small group of people at that time that were into like, there's a large group of people into wrestling, but a smaller group of people that were into like wrestling and the internet and like, you know, I'm not even sure how much we were into horror films at that time, but around like high school, I think that started to get more and more.
yeah.
So I've known the dude for, 35 years, I would say.
Jesus.
I've known him longer you've been alive, I would say.
Damn. So let me ask you this. So, you start and you're in high school with them. Do you remember what kind of got you to kind of start getting a little bit closer? Was there an instance? Was it a certain friend of a friend kind of thing, or?
Yeah, like so we hung around the same dudes, and I can remember this moment honestly like it was yesterday. It's really weird, but there was we were all in the same class together. We'd never really talked or anything that much. And then like my friends were sitting here, his friends were sitting on the other side of the table, and we just started talking about like a fucking WCW pay-per-view. And like everybody's going back and forth, like talking about this pay-per-view. And then by the end of it, we did that like every class. So we like at that moment we had some sort of like bond. And then after that, we just like every time we had that class, it would just all be about like everybody talking about wrestling and stuff like that. So that's pretty much how it started.
And what year were you in high school? Was it like 99, 2000, 2001-ish?
Yeah. We'll go with that.
Well, I'm saying, like, because like when you say I just want to put in perspective.
It was not. That would have been my sophomore year, so that we're talking about like 96, man.
Okay.
96, 97, yeah.
So it's interesting that you're talking about this kind of stuff. It's like whenever people talk about we were talking about this or that, you always think of it as the past tense, but you're experiencing Bash at the Beach in real time, and you're like, did you see what that bastard Hogan did? That's
we're experiencing like the single greatest angle in wrestling, like as it's happening, basically. Like all that unfold, the Monday Night Wars and everything, all that happened while we were in high school. So that's all the stuff that we're talking about. Yeah.
And you're a Kentucky native, correct?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Just making sure about that. Uncle Bill, this is going to go way over your head, and I apologize, but Big K Movies and Games, $2 Super Chat. Ask Bill if he puts grape seed oil on his popcorn. Do you even know if that's the thing?
I have no idea what that is. No.
My buddy Brandon, he swears by it. He puts grape seed oil on his popcorn, and he swears it's better than actual butter. So
what the hell is even grape seed oil?
That's what I
was trying to figure that out.
He's a Florida guy, so you know how they are over there. They experiment. Yeah. Thank you, Big K's Movies and Games. I appreciate it. So, you're in high school with this guy. When does the idea of like some sort of show come? I mean, I'm assuming you got to start hanging out, and you're like, hey, let's get blah, blah, blah. DVDs coming around. Are you guys Are you a collector by this point already in your life in high school? Are you getting the tapes?
No, not really. Like, I wouldn't say I was a collector or anything like that. I would say I was more of a consumer. Like I just watched everything. I didn't really have like a niche kind of thing at that point. Like
so your family wasn't like that either. They weren't.
No,
they were rented tapes from Blockbuster or Family Video. I assumed at this point, that's the kind of family you had.
Yes. Yeah. It was never anything like that. Like where somebody was like just obsessed with like one particular genre or anything like that. I just love to go to films. Now that part's always been true. I've always gone to the movies and stuff like that. That's always been there. We really didn't like. The thing that got us to start hanging out was honestly like wrestling pay-per-views because he had the black box shit where you could get free wrestling pay-per-views. So I would go over to his house and he started off, this is the type of person he is too, though. He'd start off by charging everybody that came over like between $5 to $10.
Rat bastard.
Yeah. So he got it for free, but if you wanted to see it, because it was like $40, if you try to get it by yourself. Like he at first started like having people pay $5 and shit, but then I guess he felt bad for
was it catered, or did you have to bring your own chips
no,
and dip?
They would I'm surprised he didn't have people like bring like fucking one like a potluck or something. But No, he eventually like he would have like a pizza or something like that. So we started hanging out like that, and I was over there almost every week because they had a pay-per-view every weekend back in those days, basically between WWF and WCW, and sometimes like ECW even too. Um, so I was over there all the time, and then you fast forward a little bit, we're out of high school going into college. That's when shit really started to like, I guess, like I was over there like almost every night at one point or another. It was almost like I was just fucking living there. And I mean, we hung out like pretty much all the time.
Now, are you also a musician the way Wes is, and you guys like did anything like that together? Did you jam or anything like that?
We did for a couple years, honestly. And we started off like playing like regular, just covers, things like that.
Little Bush
And
Glycerine, maybe? Is that popular at the time?
yeah, yeah. No, not around that time. I don't even think Wes started playing guitar until his like I want to say his mid to late 20s or something like that.
Oh,
Like so
okay.
yeah, I mean, but eventually like we did start playing. I played drums since I was 16, and I'd played in like bands and things like that, and we had played gigs, and so I had a little bit of like background knowledge about shit like that. And then I learned to play guitar roughly when I was 18, 19, something like that. And then he picked it up. And then, see, the weird thing about Wes, I love talking shit about him. Weird thing
Go ahead.
about Wes is like when he was in, this is so killer. When he was in high school, like he was super into like country, like fucking Alan Jackson and,
And
Garth.
you weren't.
No, dude. I was always like, since the time I've been in high school, been into metal and stuff like that.
But really quick, were you the outsider then, and Wes was more of the normal kid if he was because you're in
Yeah,
Kentucky? I mean, I hate to,
I guess so. I guess
know
that
what I
would
mean?
be, yeah. I guess that would be one way to look at it. Yeah.
But go ahead,
Um,
go ahead.
I was just thinking though, because like it was so weird because he's into all that shit, and then all of a sudden he starts playing guitar and he's into metal and shit. And I don't know if that was just like, once you start playing guitar, you pick up on like what the better stuff is to play, or I don't know what the deal was, but he just shifted really quick from like country to metal.
He
It
went
was
from
an odd transformation.
he went from GCD to bar chords, basically.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, you guys start hanging out and like what transpires? Does it go from like start hanging out watching horror movies and just talking about the stuff and then I mean, when you guys are musicians and things like that, I'm assuming somebody has like equipment and stuff to even, or do you just say, hey, you know what? When we should start doing a radio show, we should get equipment. Were you guys ignorant to any of that? What's the actual germ of the idea for
Well,
this? And what year is it when you have this
oh
germ, if you can remember?
God, dude, 2005, 2004, 2005, somewhere in that area. You talking about to start the show and everything?
Yeah, and if there's something really important before then, please stop me
No,
and bring
no,
it
I
up
mean,
to
so this is another one of those moments I can remember, even though it was just like a passing moment. I can remember it like it was yesterday. So the thing that kind of got that idea going it's again the wrestling connection. He's listening to all these wrestling podcasts and shit all the time, and he was like, okay, well, in between this, by the way, before we get to this part, the real germ of the idea was we started collecting autographs. So we get into horror films really, really like hardcore, probably like early 2000s.
Anchor Bay years.
Yeah, DVDs start getting more and more. Anchor Bay comes along and start pumping stuff out. We like really get into it, like all the Italian stuff, all the American stuff coming from Anchor Bay. Then we start doing like autographs. We start collecting autographs through the mail, like from horror celebrities, things like that. And then somewhere at that time, it's like, okay, so we know where all these people are. This is the funny part, because the idea comes from basically we've got all these people's addresses, we got their contact information. If we wanted to like do a show, we know how to get a hold of these people. So
you didn't tell me that.
That part factors into all this too.
He didn't tell me that.
So that was a big part of it, because we had all this stuff. Like we had like their manager's information, their agent's information, or just their general emails, contact information, shit like that. So
It's a different time we're talking about too.
Oh yeah, you can't. I've tried to do that now to get people. You can't even like come close to doing that now. So I remember like I'm sitting in his kitchen. I'm just sitting there. He comes in and he's like, literally, I think he just says like, we're gonna do like a horror podcast, and I have no idea what the fuck he's talking. I don't know what a podcast is really.
He said the word podcast too,
Yes,
correct?
yes. He said he knew like what that was, I guess, from the wrestling podcast. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, we're gonna do a show, like we're gonna have like a horror radio show, and we're gonna have like guests on and shit like that. We're gonna do it, like it's a studio kind of show from here.
And what's going through your actual mind? Are you looking at like, are you fucking crazy? What are you talking about? Is that what you're thinking? Or
What was going through my mind was at first like I have no idea what he's talking about. Then like I mean, if he wants to do something, we'll do it because we're like bored anyway. And then my initial thought was, well, how do you even like go about doing something like this? And to give him like credit, even though I don't like doing that because he is a piece of trash, but to give him to credit, I mean, he's the guy that like figured out how to do all this stuff. We're talking about 2004, like I said, 2005, like to get like equipment and stuff like that for doing something like this, like the early stages of anybody doing podcasts, really. Like nothing like that was really that popular at that time. So he figured it out.
And to give just the audience a little bit of perspective, this is long before the days, I believe, of like USB microphones and USB. Well, maybe I don't know if there's USB interfaces back then, but like what I'm saying is the way me and Uncle Bill are doing the show, plug and play, so to speak. This is there wasn't no streaming interfaces back then either.
No.
So this is a totally different animal we're talking about. Primitive.
I don't know for certain, but I think in the beginning that we were trying, and we may have been doing this at some point. We were running like these like Shure 57, 58 microphones through like a 4-track mixer, through something else into like some sort of software program that he had. I think that's how it was all being done. But yeah, there was no way to like plug in shit like there is just into your computer or stuff now.
And so, like, does he prep you? Like, this is the way this is going to do? Or do you guys just, like, what's the first thing you guys do, if you remember? What's the first time the red button goes off? And is there a name yet? Like, what can you remember about, like, when it's like, boom, let's go?
The very first, oddly enough, this is over. The very first thing that I remember about doing the show is the Paul Kratka interview. And if anybody doesn't know who Paul Kratka is, I don't blame you. But like, he's a dude. He was like the first interview that we ever did, or one of the first two I know. He was one of the stars of Friday the 13th Part 3. So that's the first thing I really remember about doing the show, was like finally getting somebody on the show, like talking to them, and like it just the whole setup of it. Like we didn't even have like if you go back and listen, and you can listen to this on the Patreon shit, listen to like the first couple of shows, it's just mindless, kind of like rambling, like cursing, voices, doing shit to try to make each other laugh. Like there's no format to it whatsoever. It's kind of just ridiculous. And then over time it starts to like pick up a format, and that starts when we start getting the interviews. That's really when, like, that's the part of it I can remember pretty well.
And what's the scheduling of this once you guys get going? Do you guys work on this every other day? Is there a plan? Does this factor into your daily life? Because by this point, you're an adult now. You probably got a job and you're doing it. Like, what do you remember about factoring this into your life and that sort of thing?
Okay. To give you some context to this part of it, I start my undergraduate program at the exact same time that we start doing the show. So at that point, I'm working. I work at the college at that point. I'm going to school, and we're doing the show at the same time. So, and I would say pretty much every other day we're doing something related to the show. So in my spare time, like I'm looking up addresses, I'm trying to contact people, I'm like calling people and or emailing people and doing shit like that, trying to get interviews. We had like a review kind of portion that I was like doing some of that too, where you would like the type out the reviews and put them up on the website and shit like that. So it was kind of crazy to think about now, like how all that shit was going down at that period of time.
You mentioned website, so that was already something that was in effect at that point?
I can't remember exactly when he put up the website, but we had a site before that, and we were actually writing reviews for a guy before I think we actually even started that site. And I can't remember that guy's name now. Wes probably knows, but it was like some dude that we would just like write horror reviews for and shit like that. But yeah, I actually like wrote reviews for like a horror newsletter kind of thing at that point as well.
And is that the kind of thing that you guys were into? Like, because like I really want to get the context of like what you guys did on the internet during this time in terms of like horror, because there's no YouTube, right? This is, if there is, there's certainly no such thing as there wasn't even Cool Dudes or anything like that at this point, right? So how
No,
did you, and did you have to just actively just search deep for stuff?
I'll be honest with you. I don't even really remember the internet that much back at that point. Like it wasn't like it is now where it's like everything, where like everything you think about is like the internet, like social media sites and things like that. Like I don't remember it being that much other than to say that I remember like um searching a site called, I think it was called Star Collector, which is where we got like all these addresses and phone numbers and shit like that.
Somebody look that up.
It
I'm sure
still
that's going-
exists.
Oh, really?
Yeah, under a different name, but you have to pay for it now. So
Oh.
what's the point? Yeah.
Now let me ask you this, Uncle Bill. You saying you're doing your undergrad during this time when this stuff is going on?
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be some days where you're really stressed out with school and doing this. Did you ever have days where you're like, you know what? I got to tell this guy that this can't work right now. I got way too much shit going on. Did you ever
No.
have that moment
No. I mean, I think that I think I like doing it probably as much, if not more than him. It
during
was
this time?
yeah, because it was honestly like a relief, like an escape away from all that shit. Like, and I enjoyed doing it more than I enjoyed school or anything to do with like a career or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it wasn't like that. It wasn't like I fucking hated it or anything. There was one part that was funny though, and it's in the documentary where it's like I'm getting ready to take my test for my undergraduate program, which is like the exit exam. So where if you fail it, you don't get your degree. You have to like pass to get your degree. And like Wes is like bitching at me because I missed like an interview or something like that because or missed a show or something like that because I had to take my exit exam. And I don't know, it was just shit like that that was hilarious at that time.
So when do you know? Like, so go back for a second. So Wes and you kind of divvy up doing stuff where does he say you reach out to XYZ and I'm going to reach out to this person and we're just going to see what we can catch? Or how did that work in terms of getting interviews and lining that up? And can you explain how you actually interviewed these people too, as much as you can remember from the technology aspect of it? Because that's fascinating to me too. Because like I said, no StreamYard or anything like that back then.
Yeah, so no, that we never like talked about, okay, you do this and you do that. It's just we were both basically working on the same things at the same time, it seemed like. So we were always trying to get interviews, and it didn't really matter like who it was. Like we didn't set out and be like, a lot of times we weren't like, okay, we're going to get this person this week. It was just like we had a bunch of different shit out at one time, and if somebody responded back, then we kind of like, okay, that's what we'll build the show around, kind of.
Right. Right.
So the only thing that I can say for certain that he did that I didn't do was like the editing of the show. Cause number one, didn't have any idea how to fucking do that at that time. And number two, like he had all the software and stuff for that on his computer. So like, that's the one thing that he always did. Like he would go back and edit the shows. But other than that, like, I mean, there wasn't any difference really. Like we just were constantly trying to work on getting interviews, constantly trying to work on like finding stuff, to do on the shows, coming up with show ideas, going to conventions, et cetera, like trying to promote different things like that.
You mentioned conventions. I want to talk about that for a second.
That was promotion, by the way, back in that. You mentioned like the internet. So that's the funny thing about conventions back then was that rather than like the way it is now where you can promote your show on like YouTube and like freaking Instagram, like 50 million sites, we had cards made, stock cards.
Mm-hmm.
And we would take them to conventions and you would set them on a table and people would just get all the free shit that they could from these conventions that run these tables. That's how you promoted shit. Like that's
And it
they did-
seemingly worked, I assume.
yeah.
doing
Oddly
it.
enough, that really did work. Like you would take them to music stores, conventions, sometimes like other, random like comic book shops and stuff like that. Set them out, and that's how you promoted what you were doing.
Can you kind of talk about the atmosphere of a convention in 2005? And then can you give the thumbs up or thumbs down compared to today? I'm assuming you probably wish you could go back to that era for a number of reasons, one of them being money.
Yeah. So there is, I think it's still up on there. Wes was showing it to me recently. If you want to get a good idea what shows were like back then, there is on the Garf Foundation which is the George A. Romero Foundation. It's either on their Facebook or their website or something. There is like a dude took like video of that show. We were at that show in 2004. There was a show called Flashback Weekend. It's one of the earliest conventions that we went to. I think it is the first convention that we went to. And it's like 20 minutes long, but he's just filming like the convention and like what's going on. So what's funny about that is that like there's people like, and we did this too. You would just walk up to Romero and you would sit down beside of him, and you would talk to him. He was like talking to everybody, and you would bring your stuff to sign or whatever, and you would just be right there with him. They would take your picture, or you would take a picture, things like that, with your own camera, with their camera, or whatever, like
Get
that.
the film develop afterwards.
It wasn't that bad, but like that was like $25. So you could get 2 things signed. You got your picture taken. You actually got to sit with him for like however long you wanted to. And the other people there were charging between $5. Some were free, some were $5. So you asked me like the differences between conventions like then is that it was the people that were at conventions then either had something they wanted to promote or genuinely wanted to be there because they weren't getting paid anything a lot of times or very little to be there, like the celebrities, I mean. So it was a completely different vibe. Like it was more of like you were part of this really niche cult thing that not a lot of people knew about, and it was really kind of like, I don't know, there's something about it. Like at that point it wasn't like a carnival like it is now where everybody's just trying to get your money. Like anywhere you turn, somebody wants $30-$40 for something like a picture, a photo, autograph, something like that. It wasn't. And the other thing that I remember about that time too, Anchor Bay was like promoting the release of I think it was Dawn of the Dead then, or maybe it was Day of the Dead, one of the two. And so they had like huge standees up, promoting the DVD release, and like they all these kind of like amazing kind of flyers and standouts, and like so you don't really see that a lot anymore either. Like big name companies are kind of there, and they were kind of sponsoring the event. I mean, you see companies there kind of selling their shit, but like back then they were kind of connected with the conventions.
A few people in the chat were mentioning Sean Clark. Are you seeing him around this time at conventions? Because he was getting his start around then, wasn't he?
I don't remember seeing Sean Clark until we were already doing the show. So, somewhere around, I would say 2008 or 9, probably saw Sean Clark for the first time.
At what point do you start saying to yourself, like, holy shit, what was the first guest per se, or the first moment even, that you said, I can't believe we're pulling this off? Whether you started getting bigger contacts, you started getting free stuff. What do you remember the moment where you're like, Jesus Christ, like, I think we're actually doing this? Do you remember having that moment?
Yeah, there was a couple of those moments where it was like, so I think the first one where it was like, okay, this is starting to come together was Tom Savini, because up until that point, I don't think we had anybody that was like, holy shit, like a lot of people,
marquee name.
Yeah. Like a lot of people know who this is or whatever. And then we got Savini, and it was like, that was the first one where I was and I was also kind of amazed because we'd already met him and he was kind of a douche, like in person to us. But so I was kind of amazed at how well the interview went too. Because over the phone and talking to him on the interview and everything, like it was pretty great.
Can you speak to the encounter of meeting him?
Oh yeah. So Savini was like the man that I wanted to meet at that show
Sure.
at 2004 the most, because like every film that I really, really liked, he was a part of. Like
Sure.
Dawn of the Dead's my favorite film, you know, all the Dead movies, and then Maniac and all that stuff. So we walk up to him at that show, and he's kind of like looking down. He's eating cheese like off a fucking tray with like ham and cheese on it. It's like salami and cheese. I wish that was
You
not
bugged him while he was eating, dude.
as stereotypical. Well, he's behind his table. I mean, like, you know, it's not like I went to him at a fucking
He has a
restaurant.
do not disturb sign on his
Yeah.
table.
So walked up to him, and I had like a book of like movie posters, and one of them was Maniac. And because you didn't really have like, that's another thing too, like we really didn't have a lot of collectible shit back then to have people sign.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, hey man, like I love your stuff. And I think I said something like, what was it like, you know, working on such and such movie or whatever? And he, without looking up, he's still looking down, and he goes, oh, it's the most fun I've ever had standing up. And I felt like he said that line probably 3,000 times during that weekend. Like that was probably like his go-to line, you know, when anybody came up to him. And he's still like staring down, and he doesn't say anything else. And I'm just like, okay, can you sign this? And he's still staring. He just signs it. He just hands it back. He's eating this cheese, just fucking like sitting there staring, doesn't say another word. So, and I don't know what kind of experience that Wes had with him. But that was mine. And I was just like, everybody else was cool. That's the thing that killed me. Like everybody else I met that weekend was awesome. And Savini was like just the biggest standoffish kind of like douche that you could imagine.
Mm.
So fast forward to doing this interview, and he's like, again, like you can listen to all these interviews still. It goes super well. Like he's super talkative and like nice. And it was the same kind of thing with Carpenter.
Before we get to that, though, let me ask you
Yeah.
this, because I want to be in the room where you guys get together and it's like, okay, we're about to call Tom. Here's the number. Here's the time he said to call. Is one of you the planner? Okay, here's the list of questions. This is what we're gonna do. Uncle Bill, you come in at this point. I'll start with this. Or is it just you look at each other and say, "Fuck it, here we go"? Like, what is it like? Because I'm imagining if this was me during this time, I'm shitting bricks. Like, oh my God, like, what's the plan? What do we say to this guy? Where do we start? Do we ask him how is his day? Like, what do you remember from that?
See, the funny thing about that is we had like handwritten out pages of questions, so we wouldn't like go blank and shit like that. You know what I mean? Each one of us had like we didn't work on these together or anything. We just like, here's what we want to ask him, and then Wes had his list of questions of shit he wanted to ask him, and we would take turns. We would alternate. And yes, we were like shitting bricks around that time. Like when that was probably the most nervous I've ever been was like right before you called any of those guys, like for the first time, because you didn't know like how they were going to be, what it was going to be like, anything like that. So we would alternate who called. So one person he would call, the next person I would call. I can't remember who called Savini now.
Really quick,
yeah.
How do you guys call? Is this patched into whatever software you guys are recording with? You guys are in the same room, right? At the same
Yes.
time, and you're mic'd up. Do you remember how that worked?
I think maybe Wes can speak to that more, but I swear to God, I think somehow or another it was just like a house phone with the speaker on and then like a microphone. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's in my memory.
But he handled that, is what you're saying, though.
Yeah, like I swear to God, it was something like that. Like, because we called them all on a house phone, like on just a landline phone, and it had to be just like turn the speaker on and then put like a microphone up next to it. That had to be what it was, man. And so, it was, yeah. He says for the first 2 years, that's how we did it. It was like, so around that time, there's a lot of interviews done around that time period. Like it was just done on a landline with like a Shure mic or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really quick, before we get going, let me get this. Bronson Right, well, $5. Thank you very much. I know this is off topic, but I'm curious. Bill Cosby versus Bill Cobbs versus Bill Burr versus Bill Hader. What do you guys think? I'm Cosby all the way.
I'll go with Bill Burr. I actually saw him do stand up at Richmond, and he was great.
I thought they meant in a fight. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah,
I like Bill Burr too.
I still take Bill Burr.
So you get through the Savini episode, and you started to mention Carpenter. Now I asked Wes about this, and Wes said he was just scared out of his wits about this.
That was the most nervous I was for anybody that we ever did. Yeah.
Now, can you kind of break down, take us behind the curtain, so to speak? How do you even get in contact, even in the mid 2000s? How do you get in contact with John Carpenter? Is it a direct line? What do you remember about that?
He used to have a website, and this is how easy this was. He used to have a website. I forget the name of it now. It was his production company's website, I'm pretty sure. And on it, it had like a contact email. I sent him an email, and it was like something to the effect of, hey, you know, we've interviewed this person, this person, this person. Because by that time, we'd interviewed like quite a few people. So we had enough people to where I could be like, okay, like I can put all this shit in there. And this worked like 90% of the time, man. So I would just put all these people that we had interviewed in the past and been like, you know, we're a horror radio show. Never, ever did we say podcast. Like after that initial period of time, we never called it a podcast. It was always a horror radio show.
And was that something you two discussed, or that's what you started calling it?
That was a conscious, yeah, that was a conscious thing. And we did discuss it. Like we didn't want to, that's what we wanted it to be, because honestly, man, like podcasts were kind of shit on at that time. It wasn't like Joe Rogan or anything now. Like that shit wasn't even around. Like if you said you were on a podcast, like people were like, oh, that's a bunch of bullshit. Like we're not going to do that. But if you said you were on a radio show, people were like, oh, that's awesome. Like a lot of times they would ask us too, like,
what channel?
What do you broadcast out of? And we'd be like Kentucky. Like just give them like the most generic, vague answer that you can think of to like hide the fact that it's just, at the house. But yeah, I mean, and so I sent him the email with all that in it. And like amazingly within like a day or two, he was like, yeah, he was like, because he was promoting, I think, the Ward at that time. And I couldn't believe it. Like, I mean, it was just one of those things, like everything lined up. The timing was good. It just happened to send that at the right time and he got it. And like, I guess that was back at a point in time where, they weren't getting bombarded by like a million contacts and stuff like that.
And you guys posted that. I heard that interview. It was great because you guys kind of went through his filmography, so to speak, which was really refreshing to hear him talk about, Escape from LA and In the Mouth of Madness. I don't think he was talking about that during that time to the average interview, probably at all.
No, that's one thing that we always did too, especially with like the bigger guys. Like we would go through all their films. Like we wouldn't just pick, whatever was most popular or anything like that. Like if you go back and listen to the Romero one too, like we would talk about the Crazies and stuff like that, which wasn't even, nobody really talked about that stuff. Yeah. Especially at that point in time. There was no remakes or anything of it yet at that point in time either. So yeah, I mean, it was a completely different kind of thing, because I feel like some of the stuff we talked about, especially with Carpenter, like he had never been asked like about wrestling and stuff like that. Like Carpenter was a huge wrestling fan back in the 80s. And I'm positive no interviewer had ever been like, hey, what got you into wrestling and how did you like wrestling? And shit like that. Like, so
can we swap gears for a second and move over to this? Like I said, when we started, I would hear from a number of guys, Pizzow, Jay the Stingray, back on the Deadpit forums, back in the Deadpit days. When did this become a community back then? And how much were you involved in it? And what do you remember about these forums? I've heard crazy shit happen in these forums. Somebody got married. I need to know what was this like? Bring me back to 2009, 2008. And how did this all become like this community?
the forums were like people arguing on Twitter before Twitter existed. Like that's what those forums were. I mean, they were there's so much drama on that shit, man, that happened. Some great things happened, like you said, and it was amazing, but at the same time, I have so many stories about like shit that happened on those message boards, and just so many crazy people got on those message boards. So I don't know how many people even remember message boards, but essentially, like if you went onto your website, they were just like spots where you could like post, I like Maniac, and then somebody else would come on there and be like, oh, I like Maniac too, and then somebody else would be like, I hate Maniac, fuck you, like that was, yeah, that was a message board. So like, and we were it was uncensored for like the majority of the time, so we would let people post whatever they want. You can imagine like some of the shit that got posted on that message board, just people saying the craziest stuff, fighting back and forth, like about movies, about each other, about like, just anything. And a lot of times, like back then, like we had one dude that came on there and like pretended like he was, he would like, I don't know if I should tell this story or not nowadays. It's definitely not PC, but he would like sex chat with people as a woman, but it turns out he was like a 35-year-old, 40-year-old man. And like
on a horror channel. Okay, I'm just
yes, and he would be like, he had like the profile pickup of like a hot woman and all this stuff, and then he would catfish these people from the message board, like
Wow. So when did you guys become aware of this?
Oh God, I can't remember, but sorry, I
Take
just
your time.
remember that I think that Wes got caught up in that, and so this whole time, like he's thinking he's talking to this woman, and like he's totally not, he's talking to this guy, but so much shit like that happened. It was just like craziness, but at the same time, like if you look past all the craziness too, like it was probably like one of the first online like ways that a bunch of nerds had to like get together and discuss like horror films. He really did, though. It was hilarious.
I will bring him back on for that story.
Yeah.
So who I mean, who's coming up with the idea? Obviously, message boards weren't exactly a new thing at that point. You guys had to have the idea from somewhere. What do you remember about, like, was Wes saying, hey, we're going to make this website, the name of the show? I mean, Deadpit. I remember having this conversation with, but I don't remember the details. Deadpit was not the first name you guys came up with, obviously. Do you remember? Did you have an initial idea and you were like, we should call the show blank?
I can't remember what the initial names were. I know that you're right. Like Deadpit wasn't the first name. I don't even know where the hell Deadpit came from, really, because like
it came from the movie, right? It had to have.
Well, the thing about it is we both hated that fucking movie.
It's a good name, though.
Yeah, I think that's it. It just has a good ring to it. It just works like somehow or another. Like I don't think there was any more thought into it other than that. Because if you think about it, you name a website like that after a movie, you would think that'd be a bad idea because people would get them confused and like they would think it would be like a website about the movie or something like that. But it just worked. Like somehow or another that name just worked. I don't remember the other names though.
Well, what can you remember? To go to the good side of the forums, like you said, there's probably a lot of really crazy shit that went on. People getting catfished, death threats, terrorist attacks. I don't know what the hell happened on these forums, but what names can you remember that are still active today? No, I was gonna say on a good note, that are still active today in YouTube, or friends that you've made, lifelong friends from these forums.
Oh God, dude. So I mean, Dana, Evil Dead chick was on there at one time or another. Steve ST3B was his name on the board. Steve, he still does like, shows for us and everything too. You had like Adam Beck was one of the first ones. Adam Beck was a dude we all called Buzzkill because he was one of those dudes. You would post something on there like, oh man, I just saw this movie, like it was amazing, and he'd be like, oh man, that was a piece of shit. So everybody just called him Buzzkill because like it didn't matter what it was, like he would kill the vibe of anything. oh God, Fulci Fantera was the one that was catfishing everybody. I'll never forget that name.
Say that again. Fulci Fantera.
It was like Fulci Fantera. So like,
Okay, Fulci
yeah,
Fantera. Okay, like a
yeah,
girl's name, Tara.
yeah. And um, I mean, there were so many at that time. I can't. I'm drawing a blank. But those are the ones that I can
Rio
remember.
Magnifico was he around?
Yeah, yeah.
Orc 1-2. There's Orc right there.
Or
1-4-5-6-2-6.
yep.
And how did these people become a part of the show in the forums? Was there ever a time where they would? Was there like a fan call-in show that you guys ever had or anything like
Yes.
that?
So we had that was one of the very first things that we incorporated into the show after a while was like we would have, and this was a stupid idea, but it was hilarious. We would have like just anybody could call into the show
Oh,
and
I made
ask.
that mistake myself.
Yeah. So you know how that works out. Yeah.
Do you have any stories from that you can remember? Like, hey,
Well,
you're on
like,
the air. Suck dicks.
there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that, and then there's a lot of like sometimes some of the funniest ones were like a dude called in from he was from he's either Scottish or Australian. I can't remember what he was, but you couldn't understand a damn word that he said. But it's one of the like he kept calling in, and we would act like we could understand what he was saying. We had no idea, and it's some of the funniest phone calls because it's just him like in this really thick like Scottish or whatever accent, and it was just that was just so much fun because like you never knew what anybody was going to say, like who was going to call in. Some people were like that where they would just call in and be like dickheads or like purposely try to like throw the show off or something. But most of the time it was guys like that had other websites or like we're doing horror newsletters and they would just call in and stuff like that. I forgot about Runk was an early one that was on the forum, Runk Russell and Ed, and they ran like another podcast called Blood Type Online at that time that came after ours, but it was like same general idea. So people would call in, and that was probably my favorite part of the show for a long time because of how funny a lot of that shit was.
Yeah. How many? So you're doing the show for a number of years. Like, is the show a constant while your life is just going through these changes? You're in college, you're in grad school. Does the show always remain a constant for you all these years? Are there ever times where you have told Wes, hey, I need to take a month off, man, I got a lot of shit going on? Or was the show always like a safe haven for you and an escape, so to speak?
Yeah, I don't think we ever took time off around that time.
Was there even a discussion of taking time off ever?
Not until much later, man. Like,
and I want to get there.
Yeah, but no, around that time, like, I think that sadly enough, that show was like the most important thing in our lives, like both of our lives. Like, however you want to take that, that's pretty much the truth. Like, we put everything into that show. Like, it was the most important thing that we did at that point. It didn't take a back seat to really anything at that point in time. Because at that point in time, I mean, I don't think we were ever famous. I would never say that, but I would say, like, I mean, when you are going to shows and like they're paying for you to go to shows and paying for you to set up, and you're getting people like Carpenter and Romero, and you're talking to people, and you're in with like guys that are doing like DVDs and things like that, like it feels like that. It feels like it's much more important than it probably was. I'll say that.
Yeah. And you speak to getting DVDs and stuff, so you guys were starting to get screener copies, so to speak, from like Anchor Bay and things like that.
We got every, man, I have nightmares about some of that shit, and not like in the way of like how scary it was, but like watching some of the most horrible films you would ever imagine, because when these companies would send you screeners, like you had to review them, and they would send everything at that time. So like,
what companies are we talking? Like Olive and Anchor Bay, and we
had Paramount, Sony, things like that, right? Like the bigger ones that would send us stuff.
Really?
But we also had like Tartan Asian Extreme and Camp Motion Pictures, and just like some of the like worst indie shit you can imagine that we also had to review. And there was what was the other one? It wasn't Severin, but it was very much like Severin, where just all the shit they released was just like sexploitation, trash B movies, and you had to review all that, like and there was so much of it that after a while, I got to the point I didn't even want to watch films. Like, you got so burnt out, like
Well,
reviewing.
was there a moment where you would tell us, like, honestly, like, let's just not do it? Who cares if they stop sending us stuff? This is getting out of control.
Well, what eventually happened was that like rather than us kind of like missing out on that was we would just not watch it and almost like just bullshit and like read the back of it, like almost try to like act like we watched it sometimes.
Let's set this movie up for you guys.
Yeah.
You know,
So it was, I mean, oh yeah, Gory Bits brought up TLA releasing. God, I remember them. That was some of the stuff that like awful kind of stuff. Tartan Video, TLA releasing. Dimension Extreme I thought was okay. We got a lot of good stuff from Dimension Extreme. Intervision, oh god. Yeah, that stuff.
So when does the show start to become too much to where, but let me back up for a second.
Yeah.
When do you guys start going on YouTube? Is there ever like, was there a time where Wes was like, hey, we need to start going on YouTube? Or did he say, hey, I'm going to go back and just dump a bunch of our old videos on YouTube? What do you remember from that portion of time and the YouTube thing?
The first couple, YouTube was just barely like around when we first started doing the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure exactly when it came into existence, but like the very first couple of things I remember doing for YouTube would have been like we called like Hillbilly Horror Theater. Now, all that was we took a scene from a movie and we replaced like the actors' voices with our voices, and we would make some funny like skit out of it. And they took a lot of those down now because YouTube's fucking copyright stuff is what it is now, and they like a lot of that stuff doesn't exist anymore. So that's the first things that I remember doing. And then like progressively we've kind of like figured out, okay, well we can use this for the show. So then we would do like every year we would have like Halloween horror picks. Like we would do videos about that. Like, here's our picks for Halloween this year, like what you should watch, stuff like that. And so it became more and more like a part of the show. And then eventually we would do short films, like these little kind of like short films. Like there's one for Hostel 2. It's called The Road to Hostel 2, where we go and see Hostel 2, which we hated Eli Roth and the Hostel movies. So we like decided to make this like short film, which he actually saw, by the way, and gave like a thumbs up.
Did that win you over?
What's that?
Did that win you over? Did he win you over when he gave you the thumbs up?
Kind of, because it was at least like an acknowledgement that he had a sense of humor. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, we like a lot of that, like after a while, YouTube became like a big part of the show. And then the biggest part of it, by far the biggest part of using YouTube was the on the road videos.
Those are legendary.
Yeah, for some reason, like nobody was really doing that at that time, not especially for horror films, where you just filmed yourself like talking about going to a movie, go to the movie and watch it, and then do like a review on the way back. And that everybody, their grandmother does that shit now, but like back then that was a novel kind of thing. So we did hundreds of those, man.
I know you guys did Rob Zombie's. I've watched y'all's Rob Zombie's Halloween one. Those are great.
Yeah, I know that you love those movies, and I apologize in advance, but
no, dude, it's all good. I'm a different generation. I get it.
That's probably my favorite though, overall, just because like that's a genuine reaction to that movie. Like everything in it.
Correct me. Have you guys kind of tried to keep that going when you can? Didn't you guys do one maybe last year?
Yeah, we did Scream, I think, or was it Halloween? Okay, no,
I can't remember.
I got COVID at Scream, so that wasn't the one that Wes was at from watching Scream 5. That's how bad that fucking movie is, by the way. It literally gave me COVID. And then it was Halloween. Halloween Kills, I think, is the one that we did on the road.
Halloween Kills.
Before. Yeah.
So the show is such a big part of your life, like you said. It's like you said it was the most important thing. Now, as we move forward in the timeline, I don't want to put words in Wes's mouth or anything, and he didn't say this, but correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like I got the impression you needed to walk away when the show ended.
I th- it wasn't like a Shawn Michaels I lost my smile type of thing. Like I didn't just like, but it was more like progressively like I found myself like spending less and less time doing it. So it wasn't like an all of a sudden kind of thing where I'm just like, fuck you, like, I don't want to do this anymore. But it was just like other stuff in my life started like taking more and more time. And I just progressively, like whether it be relationships or whether it be like having kids or things like that.
Are you open to talk about that? So, like, I assume you started you were you in a serious relationship at this time, and did it become a problem? I mean, whatever you're okay with talking about, because I've been sitting with this interview with Wes for so long now, and I've got all these ideas built up in my head about what really happened. And he wanted to respect your side of the story and not really get into what you had going on. And I'm dying to know whatever you can tell me, because it's just, this is fascinating to me that you guys are back, but like you guys stopped. I mean, you stopped.
Yeah.
Right, in 2013, like it was done, and
Yeah.
West seemed like it was not it was a very somber day leading up to that. Like, do you remember when it started for you internally, before you even maybe started talking to Wes about it, when you were just kind of saying to yourself, and if there was somebody with you, a significant other or something, you were like, I really got to start, this is I've got to take a step back, I've got to slow down, I got to have this conversation with them.
I don't. That's the thing, though, man. I wish I could say that I had the balls to do that, but I don't think I did. Like, I probably should have just come to him and been like, "Look, man, like this is like taking away too much time from like other stuff." And like, I don't believe I ever did anything like that. I think it was more like I just started fucking no showing stuff and like not doing as much stuff, and then progressively, like that got worse and worse to the point where at some point it just became pretty clear that we weren't going to be doing the show anymore. Like there was no show, like with us anyway. Like he kept it going, with other people and stuff like that. Because I'm sure by at some point he was like, this motherfucker ain't never showing up. Like,
Well, I mean, do you mind if I ask, do you think it might have soured your two's relationship a little bit if you were not really, because I'm trying to, like, when I think about this, if I'm Wes and you've got this stuff going on, but if you don't say it, you know what I mean? If you don't tell me, maybe I just think you don't want anything to do with me or the show anymore. Do you think
yeah,
you might have got that
I'm
impression?
I'm sure that at some point it pissed him off. Like he talked about, um, I remember listening, to the first show that you did with him and everything, and he talked about, doing that last show and like how like, it was and all this stuff for him to
It
like,
was a sad day for him. Yeah.
yeah, but I don't remember that, man. Like I don't remember that because I guess my mind was just somewhere else or something like that. Like I just was not invested in that show anymore.
You were
As
burnt out.
yeah, I just
Needed a break.
I just didn't give a shit, and I'm sure that probably did like piss him off. Um, and actually looking back on it, that was a stupid fucking idea, man. Because if we would have stayed doing that show, consistently, got on YouTube, done what everybody's doing now, and just stayed with it throughout that time period, it's untelling, like, how many people would be watching now and things like that. I mean, we lost years and years and years that we could have been doing it just because of that shit.
Did you guys go from talking every day as buddies and stuff to, after a while, it just became, hey, we're recording Thursday if you can make it there? And like,
It was kind of like that, yeah, from what I remember. Like we stopped spending as much time and stuff together. We weren't like hanging out as much as we were or anything. We would do shows like here and there and things like that, but it wasn't the same thing. And like you said, like it just my mind just wasn't there. It just wasn't at that point. Should have been.
so was there ever a moment before we get to 20, I believe it was 13, was there ever a moment where you talk to him and finally say, like, I want to know what led up to the conversation of this is it? And were you a part of that decision to stop the show? Because, like I said, I've got all these ideas of how this really happened, this split, if you will, at this time. And I assume you were not only okay with it, but you had to have been like, yeah, I need to stop.
I think this is one of those things where it's like PTSD, where my mind has just blocked it out because I don't remember how it ended. Like, I don't remember having a conversation with him and just being like, it's over with. Like, we need to do a last show, or like we need to plan to do something. I don't ever remember having that conversation. So I don't know if he was just like at some point I do kind of vaguely remember like at some point him being like, we need to like do something like some sort of like last ride show or something like that, like to end this. But that's all I kind of remember. I don't remember how it got to that point, other than the fact, like I said, I was just like no showing shit all the time. And that's where that comes from. And somebody brought this up.
Yeah.
And he still says this shit to this day. If I ever like miss a show or anything, it's like Uncle Bill let down the face. He said that shit around that time period quite a bit.
Would you listen to the shows that you missed and hear that and laugh, but almost say to yourself, there's a little bit of truth that he's saying in there? Like, he's
I mean,
the son of a bitch missed the show again.
There's a lot of truth to that at that point in time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a lot of unnecessary bullshit at that point in time.
Look, do you want me? You don't have to get into too much detail. Is your life, are you in a good place with yourself at this time? It's just, it was time to step away. You know what I mean?
You talking about at that point in time, like
in your own life, like in your actual life, or are you in a good place? And it was just, you got a family and all this thing, you're doing your thing. It's just, I have responsibilities. I've got this to take care of. I just can't sacrifice driving,
there was a lot going on personally for me at that time, including like, so trying to raise a child and then also like going through a breakup, that was pretty like devastating at that point in time. And
does he know about this when this was going on?
Yeah. I mean, he knew.
I'm very nosy, but I just want the story. I think a lot of people want the story too. That's why I don't mean to cut you off. I just want to know every bit of detail I can on this. This is fascinating to me.
He knew about all that stuff that was going on around that time. And we weren't talking like all the time, but we were talking enough to where he knew what was going on and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And, for a while there, as that breakup was going on, like I was still trying to do the show. And then
you can't really enjoy anything when you're going through a breakup like that. Like, you can't watch horror movies and talk about them genuinely. Like, I've been there, Uncle Bill. Like, you can't. It robs you of joy. You can't enjoy fucking food. You know what I mean? So I'm sure that took a lot out of you dealing with that.
You're talking about like, this was not just like, okay, like, I've got a good girlfriend or something, and I like her, okay, and then we broke up or whatever. This was like, I've got a child with this person, and we were together, and we had this whole life, and now we're not together, and what the fuck am I doing? And like, yeah.
Now we're getting somewhere.
There was a lot of stuff going on. And you're right. Like at that point, like honestly, to me, like doing a show like a horror radio show or any kind of show, like it didn't fucking matter. Like I was dealing with other shit, trying to get my shit together, trying to like, figure out what was going on with my life. So all that other stuff took a back seat to what was going on.
Now, let me ask you this. This is kind of a tough question, but I think you'll be honest with me. Even right, yes or no with this. Did you never, ever have a moment where you wanted to say to Wes, hey, you should get somebody else to take my place?
I think I did say that.
You did? Because I'm wondering if there was a part of you that was, even if you did ask it, I'm wondering if there's a part of you that's like, this is, I started this with him. I can't let some son of a bitch come in here. Even if you asked him, and if you did you really believe that you wanted him to do that, or that he would do it if you asked him?
Well, I'll put it to you this way. There was, so Steve started filling in, and that's where he got the name The B Plan, because they used to call Steve, like who does all the show shit now, The B Plan, because his last name's Benningfield, but also because like he was the B plan for when I didn't fucking show up, which was a lot. So, and that always did bug the piss out of me, man. Like, I'm not even going to like act like it didn't. Like when somebody else like that would fill in and stuff, like it irritated me because like I felt like, yeah, that was my kind of spot or whatever. Who did
No, I
that?
get it. I get it, dude.
Yeah.
That was your baby. You're the one he's having a conversation with back in 2004. Hey, we're gonna do this, and you put all those miles and time into it. And even though you're burnt out, it's like, damn it.
Yeah. I
It
mean,
almost felt like another breakup, maybe.
it did. Like all the shit was like happening at one time. Like everything was just kind of
This is all making sense now. You're
coming
going through a lot
apart.
of shit. Yeah.
Yeah. And so at the same time that that's going on, by the way, um, you know, with me, I also feel too like that Wes is like he's getting into a relationship. It's pretty serious, like
Mhm.
first serious kind of relationship that I can remember him being in. And like a lot of different stuff is happening in those ways too. To where I don't think it maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't think it was as important to him either at that point. Like
I
now,
think it's probably
granted,
fair to say.
like I think that the shit came first and kind of fucked a lot of stuff up. But I think that after a while, like I don't think it was is that important to him.
So do you think ultimately it was Wes's decision to put it to a stop?
Ultimately, that show lives and dies with Wes. Yeah. And it always has and it always will, to be honest. So if he wants to stop doing it, like he'll stop doing it. I think that that's what had to happen. Like I think that show would have still gone on if he wanted to do it. Like he would have just found other people to do it. Like
Mhm.
other, fill-ins.
Now
So
he claims he's never been able to listen back to that show. Have you ever gone back and listened to this infamous show?
no.
Could you?
No. No, that's so fucking
Because
that's
you gotta go back to a part of your life that was clearly not your finest hour,
I was
right?
getting ready to say, like, it's like one of those things where if I go back and listen to that show, not only does it take me to that moment for that show, but it takes me back to that moment in my life. And I'm not all about that. I'm like
Mhm.
trying about moving forward,
Right, right.
not going back to that point. Yeah. So no, I'll probably because that is just too much at that point, man. To go back.
All right, so let me ask you this. Like you have this show, it's over. You tell Are you with Wes in the same room doing this show? The
We
last
all
one?
we always were, from what I can
Okay, just
remember. Yeah.
because I've never listened to the show either. It's kind of hard for me to, just because I've heard the story now, and it's just like, God, like I don't know that I want to hear it myself. But you leave Wes's house that night. You tell him bye. When is the next time you legitimately talk to him?
You mean just as like a friend or just for the show or as a like I don't think he and I ever stopped talking per se.
But it
We
was
just
different after that.
yeah, it was different. Like it was a lot different. I will say that. Like and there was periods we would go a long time and not talk to each other and stuff like that. But like we always kept in contact one way or another.
Mhm.
Um but that did change a lot about our friendship and stuff too, but shit like that just changes anyway, man. Like over time, like that's a natural kind of thing anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think as you get older you find out more and more the people that you like hung around with in your teens give way to your 20s, and the people you hung around in your 20s around in your 30s. I mean, the fact that he and I have any kind of relationship now and we've like known each other for
It's
35
incredible.
years
It's
is amazing.
incredible.
Yeah.
You guys are gonna be like the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, it's pretty. And that's the one thing that's held that always together. Like the Stones has been music, with us has been the show.
When this all goes down, everything's done. Is Uncle Bill MIA on the internet for a while? Are you just kind of you have your social media accounts and you check in on stuff? I mean,
Yeah, I didn't listen to any of the shows. I didn't go on to any of the pages or anything like that.
you didn't
I
revisit
I
anything.
didn't. Every now and then, if I can remember this correctly, every now and then, like, but this was not for a long time after that. But every now and then, like years after that, like there might have been a show or something, just like a rare kind of like random thing. Because it seems like there was like a revival kind of thing, but not this revival, but one like previous to this revival. that
like an
was
ECW one night stand, if you will.
kind of thing that didn't last very long.
Yeah.
But this last one has been the longest that any of this has lasted since we did the original show.
Yeah. So safe to assume that Uncle Bill's life over the next couple of years, we get in a better position. Things start looking up. And I know Wes started doing a show, WrestleManiacs,
Yes.
and you were not a part of that.
No, that's the thing. Like, because they reference this all the time too, but I just wasn't around for this like period of time. So I think that's when Garrett really starts like getting involved and like doing shows and things like that. Like,
And
he
you'd
and
known
Wes-
him way before then because of the Deadpit forums, correct?
Yes, like he had been on there for like a long time. And I don't know, Garrett, you're on here, you can speak to this, but I'm pretty sure you called in like to the show. Like, I'm fairly positive I remember that too. But yeah, so the WrestleManiac show is just a completely different thing. So he's like, at one point, I swear to God, I remember like he tried to do like a different type of show that wasn't about horror films. It was about like everything, and that didn't work. It was
Too
like about all
broad.
kinds,
Yeah.
all kinds of different like stuff. That didn't work. I forget what that was called. And then there's like there was the wrestling shows. So I just feel like that he's still trying to do shit. Like, he still enjoys doing it. Like, he's just trying to like do different kind of outlets because he's
He got
probably
he got the bug again, so to speak. It
Yeah.
sounded like, and you know,
Yeah,
I
and he
think that
just
was
didn't
probably a
wanna,
part
like,
of him
deal with it.
too that knew I can't speak for him, but I think there's probably a part of him that knew I can't do Deadpit without Uncle Bill, and I think that's probably why he never, at that point, even.
I honestly don't know if he ever thought that.
I think he thought that. I do. But when do you? You're talking about Garrett. He said so. That's where he started becoming more involved on the YouTube side for the first time that you recall was the WrestleManiac show.
Yeah.
Are you watching this show at all in your spare time or anything?
I don't remember it. I don't remember watching it. I remember maybe doing, but that's the thing. Like, this part of it gets jumbled up in my mind because like there was a couple of occasions where I came on and did shit that I don't really even like remember that much because it wasn't like a steady kind of thing. So I may have done like a couple of those here and there. I know that like he was doing other shows with like Garrett. Sometimes he would have Steve. Sometimes he would have like a combination of different like people on there.
Yeah.
Just trying to do something.
Who mentions to who first? Let's do a Deadpit show. This YouTube and Wendy, like, so to set the stage though, I mean, I recall Wes mentioning a lot of these people that were in the forums as Deadpit fans are YouTubers now doing all the stuff that we did. And Wes had a little bit, I could tell he was a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. And I think I would too.
Yeah.
And you also probably had to have a little chip on your shoulder. Like, look at this shit. Because now as you guys step aside, guess what happens? Horror just keeps blowing up, right? It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then that Walking Dead crap comes out. Now everybody's a horror fan. So everybody's watching reviews. Is there ever moments where you're sitting down at the house and you're just like, this is bullshit? Like, we put in all this work and everybody's enjoying the fruits of my labor. I mean, do you ever have those moments where you two talk shop about this? Like, look at these motherfuckers.
That yeah, we do that a lot nowadays, but like that thought never entered my mind until like I got back into it and kind of looked around at like what other people were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, these motherfuckers are doing shit that we did 15 years ago. Like, they're doing, I mean, and that there, I have two thoughts about that, by the way. My first thought is like, there's not a whole hell of a lot that anybody could do that we didn't do, because we did a show probably 2 or 3 times a week, every week for years, man. So like, there's not a whole lot of show ideas that we didn't do back then. My second thought is like, you know, at least that means that there's people like getting into the genre still, and they're like still like doing stuff and still excited about doing stuff. There's a part of me though that kind of wishes like, because now there's 500 horror shows, man, on YouTube. There's so many fucking horror shows that I like. can't even keep up with them. And they're all essentially like doing one of two things. They're either doing like reviews or they're like Bluetooth kind of shit. And you don't want me to get into that shit. You do not want me to get into that shit. Because when I look around at like the landscape of things, like right now, it's really depressing to me that more people aren't trying to do something fucking creative.
I hear you. And
I mean,
no, go ahead. Go ahead. This is your show.
They're just, there's a lot of people that want to be either known or that they don't have a whole lot of hell else going on other than like, I got a stack of movies that's like 50 feet tall. And that's what their identity is, basically. And there's something about that just fucking drives me nuts, man, because there's like anybody, I could bring my 8-year-old child in here and be like, go online, order 20 DVDs. We'll have a fucking stream. You show them and that's the show. I just, that kind of shit just drives me insane. Like there's nothing to that. And we've done those shows because they're easy and like people like, you know, people still watch them, but it's like playing Sweet Home Alabama in a fucking band. You know what? I don't play that song because I like to play it. I play it because like other people like it and it's easy.
Right.
That's it. I can't imagine people enjoy like what do you get out of just buying shit and then just being like
and doing video and like doing a video on it and like that's it. No, you never watched.
That's your thing. But I don't know. I didn't ever like when I was away from all this have any thought about like, man, we should have been fucking famous. Like, you know, like holding on to like this. If we'd have just fucking, you know, whatever, like we would have been famous. None of that was ever into my mind. And as a matter of fact, like I didn't give a shit about any of it until we started doing the show again. And then, like I said, that's when I started paying attention to like what other people were doing in it.
You know, when I look behind you, I see posters that I'm assuming you've had for a while and props and things like that. Did you ever sell any of it and say, screw all this? Or did in the back of your mind, did you always have that? No, I'm going to hold on to this stuff.
No, I never sold anything because I've always been a fan. Like me not doing the show didn't take away that. Like I've never sold anything.
Me neither.
I'm one of those people that like I've got like if you could see the shit around me right now, it's stupid. Like
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Now, if I keep saying 10 more years, I'm going to sell like my Laserdisc collection. Like I'll wait till all my Fridays and Nightmares are worth tens of thousands, then I'll sell them. But you know, every 5 years, I just say another 5 years. You know, that's how it works.
I feel like this is just me, but I feel like I'm constantly like thinking I'm waiting for that sweet spot where the market's going to be like at this point where it's like the most it's ever been that you could ever get for anything, and then I'll sell it. That
sell,
never
boys, sell.
Yeah, that's never going to happen. Like it's just a bunch of bullshit. We're just kind of hanging on to this stuff. Yeah.
So Wes had mentioned to me when the bug came back to kind of get the ball rolling. Maybe not that you were hesitant, but actually, I think it was actually quite the opposite. That once you saw the ease of communication, and you don't have to drive, you don't have to. I don't know how far away you guys live from each other. I'm assuming it's at least 20-30 minutes, but it's like you have to add up this time, then add up that time, and then you have to go record the show, then you got to drive back, and it's like you're able to cut that downtime out by a significant amount. And that's when you were like, this I can do. I think I can manage this. If I can do this in my home. Was that like the light going off for you? Like, I can do this.
Yeah. Well, at first, like, because you got to keep in mind too, like I'm away from anything that has to do with any of this stuff for years. So like, I don't know anything about the advancements that have been going on YouTube and shit like that. Like I have no idea, but like, so he, you know, comes back with the idea of like starting it up again. And I didn't
were you receptive to the idea? I'm sorry. Were you because I want to I like to get inside your mind. Were you even receptive to the idea when he, because like you said, he's the one that comes to you about it. And what's going through your mind at this point? Are you saying to myself, oh shit, like, is this going to take up a lot of my time again? I love this guy, but oh man, I just don't know if I can do this. The initial reaction you have when he tells you, let's do it again.
Honestly, I think a part of me was like, yeah, we got like unfinished business. Like that's what I was thinking. Like there's unfinished business. Like it ended in a really shitty way. Like let's end it like in a more palatable way. Like let's do something. Like it may suck and we may like, you know, it may not work or whatever, but let's try to do something at least just to see if we can still do it. Like that was my thought initially. And then all of the ideas about how to do it, like you didn't have to go down there anymore because that was a whole thing, you know, to do that. Because now, like, I got a family, like, it's all a lot of shit that goes into like just leaving and then, you
A
know,
lot of
like
moving pieces.
spending 2 or 3 hours somewhere and then coming back. You know what I mean? Like, you
It's
just,
a madness. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you
yeah.
got responsibilities. You're in a different part of your phase of your life at this point.
But now, like, you can do like this, like what we're doing right now. So, like, once I figured that part out and like how to do that and that kind, then yeah, it all kind of just like clicked into place and pretty quickly, like, could at least figure out the basics of, you know, some of these sites and how to stream and things like that. It wasn't the greatest in the beginning. Like you can go back and watch some of like the early like stream videos that we did and shit, and it's pretty bad. Like
Yeah.
there's no great audio or video or anything like that at all. Not even like in a very, very rudimentary way, but at least we were figuring it out. Like you could tell, like we're figuring out like what we're doing again.
And it seemed like you guys kept some good contacts that you had before, like Michael Felcher and excuse me, Don May Jr., correct? And people, and those guys are almost what secondary Deadpit family, almost, if you will, right? I mean, you guys have known them for a while, and you have
Yeah, those guys are not guys like that I would even consider to be like just select like just people that we've interviewed or whatever. Like I mean, we've met and eaten dinner with those guys, and I've been up to where Don May lives, and like I mean
so
that's a
it
whole
runs deep. Yeah,
yeah. Like we're not like best friends or anything,
first
but
name basis.
we know each other like pretty well.
Yeah. So that's great. So the show and it's I remember Wes said something like once you know you saw how easy everything was to do, like you were on fire and you were doing more shows than him sometimes, and you're doing Monday night Jaws shows, which I think is hysterical. And you look like you're having a blast doing these kinds of shows, and like you stay pretty busy, and you do I don't know, a number of shows a week now. So I mean, it seems is it safe to assume that you know you're having more fun doing the way the show is now, even more than before, or is it just different, but a good
Yeah,
different?
yeah. It's well. Here's the thing too. It's a lot less stressful now because like you're not sitting there with a fucking landline in your hand, like trying to call somebody and you know trying to get on the phone with Romero or Carpenter or something like that. Something about that, man, that was my least favorite part of those shows. Like people always talk about the interviews, but like those were nerve wracking fucking
I bet.
experiences. Like I never enjoyed that part of it. So nowadays it's just like, okay, like I'm gonna do a Fulci show, or like, all right, we're gonna like, you know, do a news show about like shitty news story. It's whatever you want to do, and it's fun, and like the people that you're around are people you want to be around, and there's no pressure to it or anything. So yeah, I like doing it now. I would say it's easier and a little bit more fun now than it was even back then.
And do you guys even have conversations about this is what we need to do in the future? This is a new plateau we need to hit, or is it just
Oh yeah, we have those conversations like all the time.
yeah?
Yeah, like here's what you know.
Is there anything
Just,
you can share about stuff that you guys want to make happen one day, or what's the big
well,
plan? Or
yeah, well, we've been talking more and more about like, unfortunately, like trying to get more interviews, like bigger, like kind of you know name interviews and things like that again, because we still do have a lot of the contact information and stuff, and it's still a possibility that we could like get up with some of these people. But once you start doing that, man, it's like, and we've done some interview shows, and I feel like that something has shifted nowadays where people really don't like get on these shows to watch interviews anymore. like they get on these shows like to kind of just bullshit and escape and like, talk about like films and stuff. I, the interview shows we've done have never done as well as even just like doing like, a show about fucking Scream Factory or something like that. So I don't know how well that would work out anymore, but we've got like certain points of things that we're going to like try to do.
Yeah.
Getting,
Is there any funny anecdotes you can remember in terms of, you mentioned Scream Factory. I know that we told the story with Wes about the infamous Nightbreed set debacle. Do you remember anything funny? Do you guys have any sort of relationship with Scream Factory? Like personally, do they not like you guys? Because you guys have been open about talking about how shitty they are, right? I mean, that's no secret.
They suck.
Right?
I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. They're like one of the worst companies out there still. Like they're right now, they're just releasing all of their like Blu-rays into 4K with no new extras. If that just tells you anything about like that company.
Yeah.
But do we have any kind of relationship with them? Not at all.
Did you guys ever get stuff from them?
Yes. Yeah. For at least a year, I think we got stuff from them.
What caused that stuff?
You know the answer to this, Christian. You have to. Like what caused
My audience doesn't.
Yeah. Okay. What caused that to stop was the fact that we got on like the radio show and said that like everyone should take a shit in their boxes of like the Nightbreed set and send it back to Scream Factory.
And you say that, or did Wes say that? Probably you, huh?
Wes said that. I kind of just backed him up on it.
Yeah.
So what's funniest about that is to hear Michael Felsher tell it, because Michael Felsher worked at Scream Factory at that time, and he was apparently around that guy when he heard the show, and like knew at that moment that we would never have any kind of relationship at Scream Factory again, because that guy was apparently super pissed that we were telling people to shit into like the Scream Factory boxes and send them back.
But you take a little pride in that, right? Like, hey, they're paying attention to us, and they're probably still paying attention to you guys.
Yeah, well, they liked one of our shows here recently because we get them more press than probably anybody doing those fucking Scream Factory shows, like the history of Scream Factory.
Yeah.
I mean, like they love us. They love to hate us, I think, more than anything. But I don't. The one thing in mind with me though, I don't give a fuck about any like people sending us stuff anymore, or like having relationships with companies or shit anymore, or trying to kiss anybody's ass anymore. I don't give a fuck about none of that stuff. So like if it sucks, like what happened with this Severn Forward Flies shit, or what happened with like, the Scream Factory stuff with all the 4Ks now, then you can guarantee like we're going to talk about it.
Now, are you more of the wild one between the two? Does Wes ever have to say like, hey man, like that was a little rough? Does he ever have to reel you in?
I'll put it to you this way. I don't know which one of us is more like,
because behind the scenes we all do locker room talk, right? But
yeah, I do feel like that he and Garrett probably wish that I wouldn't say some of the things that I say from time to time.
Probably more so Garrett.
Yeah, but I don't care. Like I've just gotten to that point in my life where I don't care about like offending people that I don't know.
You don't want to bend a knee. You got enough. You've got enough stuff. You don't need any more stuff.
No, that's true. I don't. Yeah.
And bringing up Garrett really quick, you guys obviously do a lot of stuff with him. I think you guys even kind of co-stream. Was that just like a thing that you guys talked about when Garrett, was that a way to like kind of bring him into the fold with you guys when he started his channel? Or are you close with Garrett as well as both of you guys are close with him, right?
Yeah. I love Garrett to death. Garrett is like Wes has always said, Garrett's like the straight A student of like our bunch. Like he's the clean cut, like rated G, kind of guy. And we're kind of like the scumbag, potheads. If I don't know, to use it like an analogy. So
y'all are greasers, he's a soch, kind of like from the outsider.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
But something about here's the common factor about it is that Garrett knows his shit. Like really, that's all there is to it. Like he knows about movies, he knows like about collectibles, he knows about memorabilia. Like he just knows all that stuff. He knows about wrestling. Like so, it doesn't matter if he's fucking however he is, like is different from us. Like as long as he knows about the shit and can talk about it, that's what you're doing anyway, so it doesn't matter. Also, he was doing shit with Wes before I even like came back.
Right.
So they were already doing stuff, like the two of them on StreamYard and stuff like that, or whatever they were using at that time. I don't remember if it was StreamYard, before I even started like doing the show again.
Yeah. Well, Uncle Bill, you know, I think we've told a lot of the story. I got a lot of the questions I had answered, and I feel like I got the big picture now, which is really cool. It's just cool to have you on to talk about this, because without you guys, I know I wouldn't be here, because of the people that influenced me. You influenced them. So I don't think you guys still truly have a grasp on how much reach you have. Because like, if you were going to look at a family tree, I'm off of the Deadpit family tree. I just didn't realize it. You know what I mean? Like, that's how deep it ran. So, and then I influenced other people to get into YouTube too. So it's just like, you got a lot of kids. you know, everybody jokes you got a lot of kids.
Damn sure.
You guys got a lot of kids. I mean, it's just true. So, and you know, I always like to, you know, give a shot of praise to the people that are influential, for sure, because I don't think enough people do that, quite frankly. I think everybody's trying to do the rat race on YouTube, and you know, I don't operate that way. So when I did the show with Wes to learn, and I'm kind of glad that you couldn't be there, because then we wouldn't have gotten all this. And I think the audience would agree. We really got, you know, the documentary on y'all was great, but this is a documentary in a sense now, like years and years later. This is the dark side of the ring kind of stuff. Well, you know what I mean?
And the weird thing about the documentary is that it did. I hate to say this, but like, they should have done that documentary about 5 years after that. And then it would have been amazing, because then you would have seen like all the shit that was going on that like led to the end and all that too. But at this point that they did, like, everything was going great, and like it was like a big party, and that's what that documentary really is. It's just like somebody kind of filmed a party that we were having at that point in time. Like, we're on top of the world. So, but yeah, no, I mean, I love talking about this stuff, and I love the idea that anybody's interested in this shit, because honestly, like,
you guys are the Uriah Heep of YouTube. Like, you're the legends, but not enough people know about you. You know, I'm serious. You know, like, not enough people know about you. And it's funny when I talk to people, because there's a section of my audience that is younger, and my hope in doing shows like this is to, you know, like, you know, I'm like 90s grunge era, but you guys are the 70s rock. You guys are the Blue Oyster Cult and Uriah Heeps. I'm the Slaughter, you know, or whatever, you know. So there's always like that. You got to go back, and I think you guys are really where. I mean, I asked Wes this question, and he sounded pretty sure. I'll ask you the same question to end the show. Are you guys the very first horror internet radio show?
If there was any way to verify that, other than for me to say this, like, I don't remember anybody else doing it. I don't remember like hearing anybody do a horror talk radio show. Nothing like what we were doing whatsoever. So I'm going to say, yeah. If there was, then
show yourself.
Yeah.
If there is, show yourself and prove it.
Yep. If you were doing anything like that prior to like 2005, then let me know. But I do not know of any.
Yeah. Well, Uncle Bill, just in case there are people here that are listening after the fact, or even here now, that don't know where to find you guys, it's pretty self-explanatory, but please tell them where they can find and follow you guys.
So, of course, like, there's the YouTube page, which you just search Deadpit Radio. Into the Deadpit on Instagram. There's a Patreon page, Deadpit on Patreon, which, by the way, shameless self-promotion. We are now selling the End of the Pit. We've got the rights back for the first time in like 10 years to the End of the Pit documentary. And we're selling these for $10 shipped now on Patreon only. So you have to be on Patreon. Or actually, that's not true. Grindhouse Video is actually selling the documentary as well.
Wow.
So if you want to go on Grindhouse Video and buy it, you can. Or you can buy it from us directly through Patreon, the End of the Pit documentary, which is, like I said, like, it's a point in time. Like, it's kind of like just a period in time that's pretty hilarious to watch. to go back to that time period. So there's that, but like just in general though, like we do shows every week. If you want to check it out, like tomorrow we're doing the Evil Dead Rise commentary with a bunch of people, Rambo and a bunch of other people. Rambo, by the way, is another guy that's been like,
OG.
yeah,
I've watched him for a long time.
Dude, he's been doing at least as long as us, like probably right around the same time. He's been doing movie reviews. Rambo Rap for Life, if you want to check out his YouTube page.
Yeah.
And his we're going to be doing that with him. And then like we got the big show coming up, which is the Vinegar Syndrome Halfway to Black Friday show, which by the way, I don't remember anybody else doing that show before us either. Doing a Vinegar Syndrome show like that. So there's that. And we do stuff like Wes gave me a list of shit, but it's like 20 pages long and I don't feel like going through all of it. There's a lot.
That's a conversation y'all got to have after this. If you miss anything to promote,
exactly.
That ain't on me.
Just go on the YouTube page. Yeah. Buy the documentary. So it's $10. She ain't gonna kill you. Yeah.
I was gonna say I'm on the Deadpit Patreon as well. And when I say you get your money's worth, I mean, there's so much years and years worth of interviews. You would look different by the time, if you wanted to listen to everything, you would look different when you were finished. That's how much stuff they have on there.
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, every original Deadpit show is on there now, which is insane considering how many we did. Like any song you can think of that we ever did, like on the show, a lot of the MWO shows that we ever did, like the midweek shows that anything new that we do, you get early access. I mean, there's a lot of shit on there. Like it is probably like one of the best kind of Patreon pages, like for content anyway.
Well, there you have it, guys. Uncle Bill, thank you so much for.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
This was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. So,
yeah.
For the audience, I appreciate you guys in the chat. I'm sorry. Obviously, this was a semi-intimate conversation, so I wasn't able to really communicate with you guys well, but I was keeping an eye on you, and I want to thank everybody in here. Toronto Freddy, TJ, there's Garrett, Michigan Dipper, Gory Bits, Dave G, all you guys. Thank you so much. You can say that you were here for the Uncle Bill interview. And if you're watching this after the fact, thank you. I do hope you enjoyed it. Follow Deadpit on YouTube, the original horror radio show. We thank you guys so much, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thank y'all.